So today we're going to talk about some tips and tricks as it relates to creating cinematic footage using just your iPhone. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go into our phone and we want to take a look at settings. And after we open up settings, we want to scroll down to camera. And when we get to our camera settings, we want to look at our video quality settings first. Now, mine's set for 4K 30 frames per second, and depending on which version of phone you have, you may be able to record 60 frames per second at 4K. What I want to do though is I want to catch 60 frames per second. That way, just in case I want to slow down my video, and cinematic footage is typically a little slower than normal speed, and it just gives it that real cinematic look. Now when you're finished creating your video, and you put it out for TV or YouTube or any other platform. But when we create that cinematic footage, we typically want to film at 60 frames per second or even use the slow-mo feature on our camera to capture those slow moments so that we don't drop a frame. Typically TV we view 24 frames per second or FPS, and basically that's measured in hertz, and that would be 24 hertz. And sometimes in live TV you'll see 30 and sometimes even 60. But hertz is basically the number of times per second that a TV refreshes, okay? So we don't want to drop below 24 frames. So if I took 60 frames per second, slowed it down 50%, and that cuts it to 30 frames per second, I'm still above that 24 frames per second so that it creates a nice image and we don't lose or drop any frames on that final product. Now, so another setting that you may want to use is the grid, okay? And what we want to do when we film is we want to use the rule of thirds, okay? When you're capturing that cinematic footage, oftentimes that focal point is not in the center of your video. Oftentimes it'll be off in one of the thirds of the screen, and that grid just helps you identify where that rule of thirds and how you can use that to create better footage. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is light. Now, in this case, I've probably got a little too much light. I've got the sun behind the camera and I'm using it to light up my face. Maybe getting a little bit of washout just because that sun is a little strong today. But nonetheless, we don't want our sun to be behind us or that light to be behind us. So one of the things that you don't want to do is to film yourself in front of a window. As you can see here, it made the subject really dark. So a better way of doing that is to use the window to light your face or the subject. That's just a great way to use light. So you could also pick up a cheap, relatively inexpensive light from Amazon or maybe even Walmart, such as this. This one came with several filters. It was a relatively inexpensive light. Got several different settings, allow you to adjust the amount of light, different spectrums, and came with a few filters just to give you that different look. You could also use your iPhone and maybe the flashlight. Just depends on what your purpose is and what your goal is that you're trying to accomplish, okay? Now if we're filming outdoor footage, the best time to shoot outdoor footage is that first hour of daylight or that last hour of daylight, dawn or dusk. It just provides optimal lighting for your subject, and you don't get that washout like you're getting right now as I'm shooting this video. And also, your subject's not going to be squint-eyed, kind of like I am now, just due to the sunlight and the position and kind of midday here. So let's talk about some camera movement. One of the things that I hate the most is when somebody picks up their camera and the first thing they do is, they take that photo at eye level, okay? We want any perspective really but eye level, belt level. Even on the ground looking up provides a great perspective for viewing video or even taking photos, okay? So now let's talk about camera movement. As it relates to camera movement, there's a few things we can do. With video, probably my least favorite perspective is just that still perspective, standing still, nothing moving. So, what we've talked about is ways to make our camera move using a selfie stick or using a gimbal like I am. And, you can see some of those examples here. So let's talk about those examples for just a second. All right. First of all, you have a push. And you can see I'm pushing that camera towards the subject. All right. Then maybe you have a pull where you pull that camera away from the subject. Okay. Another one of my favorites is the reveal shot. You can see the reveal shot here. Just adds a nice touch to your cinematic features. And then another one of my favorites is a tracking shot. You'll see us use these a lot with our principal announcements every day, where I'll track Miss Austin as we shoot those shots with my gimbal, and she's walking. But you can also get those from the side, you can get those from the back. Just a whole different perspective, and it really improves the quality of your footage. Lastly, you could pan left or you could pan right, and again, it's just a different look and it makes your footage appear so much more professional. A couple things you can do to really enhance your footage and add some emotion. Number one, having your subject touch their face, maybe fix their hair behind their ear. Those things will all add a nice cinematic touch to your footage. Alright, so anytime you're out capturing footage, one of the first things that I always recommend is to capture that shot more than once. Typically 3 times, maybe from 3 different angles. Now if you have one of the new iPhones, you have the ability to capture 3 different perspectives from one viewpoint, with the wide angle, the regular angle, and then the telephoto angle. So I would recommend that you capture your subject all three ways, just because you never know when you may go back and decide that, you know, one is superior to the other on the editing side. You know, don't be afraid to get up close with your subject. You're going to get a little better detail, and it's just going to have more of an emotional touch when you create that cinematic footage. Okay, and one of the other tips that you can do to create a transition just on the film side is you can take your iPhone, you can swipe it up, or you can swipe it down. And it just creates a nice natural transition that you can add to just give your video a little more of a professional look. So one of the last tips on the exposure side that you can do to really improve your footage is to lock the exposure. So on your iPhone, when you're taking that video, if you hold your finger on the screen with a little square, all right, it's going to say AEAF lock. And that's going to lock the exposure so that camera is not naturally adjusting while you're shooting those clips. Okay guys, just some basic tips. I hope those tips helped, and can't wait to see your cinematic footage and what you're able to create using some of those tips. Thanks guys.